Welcome to the Infuse Compassion Podcast, hosted by me, Amy Quisenberry.
And me, Mark Carpenter.
We are on a mission to make this world a kinder place for us all by bringing healthier human connection to communities, families, and organizations of all types and sizes.
Our goal is to create stronger relationships, more inspired teams, increased trust, and improved results.
So let's get started with more ways to infuse compassion into our world.
Welcome, Compassionators, to another episode of the Infuse Compassion Podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you happen to be in the world or whatever time you happen to be listening to this. We're just glad you joined us. I'll tell you, I'm here with my co-host, Amy. And Amy, one of the great parts of doing this podcast is the opportunity to meet just really cool people. And we've got another one of those on with us today. Amy, would you do the honor of introducing our guest today?
I would love to do that. All right. So listen, I had the pleasure of actually meeting this person in person. We have a mutual friend. When she heard I worked in the world of compassion, she said, "Oh my goodness, you have to meet this woman." Her name is Sara Schairer, and she is the one who created the Compassionate bracelets. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I've seen her TED Talk. I love her." Let me tell you a little bit about Sara, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sara to just talk to us and tell us all of this amazing work and discoveries that she's found. So listen to this. Sara, she's the founder and executive director of Compassionate, a nonprofit organization and global social movement whose mission is to inspire daily compassionate actions and attitudes. Sara teaches compassion in schools, hospitals, and businesses. She has facilitated the Cultivating Compassion training at UCSD Center for Mindfulness, which I took, and it's absolutely amazing. Kaiser Permanente, the Naval Medical Center, and she's led compassion trainings in Africa, sponsored by the Botswana Ministries and Health of Education. She's a guest blogger for the Chopra Center, and is a contributing author to the book, The Neuroscience of Learning and Development, Enhancing Creativity, Compassion, Critical Thinking, and Peace in Higher Education. And she's also authored the book, A Case for Compassion. Sara, welcome to the Infuse Compassion Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me, Amy and Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Sara, I would love to start with, I shared a lot about you, but we want to hear your story. And in your story, can you share your origin story of how you came into this world of compassion?
Yes, happy to do that. It's kind of a long story, but I'll try to keep it short because I know we don't have a lot of time. But back in 2008, so this is, many, many years ago, my daughter was a year and a half old, and I was facing an unwanted divorce. I had quit my job to be home with her, and I don't know if you remember 2008, but there were no jobs because there was an economic fallout during that time. So I was really in a pickle. My life that I had planned so perfectly was not going as planned. And I was a mess. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was crying all the time. And one day while my daughter was napping, I saw an Ellen episode that changed the trajectory of my life. She was interviewing Wayne Dyer, the author and speaker who's since passed away. And he was talking about compassion. And Wayne Dyer said, compassion is the most important lesson to teach our children. If we would teach our young people compassion, we would solve all of the social problems on the planet. No more hunger, no more war. It's gone with compassion. And I had never really thought about the power of compassion before, and I couldn't get it out of my head. And that very night, the word compassionate appeared in my mind as two words, compassionate. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. It's like, Google it or just do it, right? This seems like it could be a bumper sticker. So I Googled it and I was surprised no one else had done anything with it or thought of it. And so I did go after the trademark for stickers. And I postponed that trademark for a few years. And during that time, I began to compassionate in my life. So whether it was for a grumpy boss or a tricky client or even interactions with my ex, I realized when I prioritize compassion for others and myself, things just go a lot more smoothly. And my life became a lot sweeter. So I realized this little phrase is very powerful. I needed to get it out there. So I started making stickers that turned into t-shirts, that turned into these wristbands that you flip every time you compassion it or self-compassion it. And then in 2000, this is 2012 when I started to create all of this. Someone sent a wristband to a YouTuber in England who had hundreds of thousands of followers on her YouTube channel. She did a quick little thing about her compassionate wristband. Literally overnight, Compassionate became a global movement with teams from all over the world ordering our wristbands. We didn't even have a website. It was a Facebook page. And so you're like, okay, so you sell wristbands. How are you teaching compassion? In the meantime, I became pretty obsessed with compassion, and I found out that Stanford University has a Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. They had developed an 8-week course, the course you took, Amy, Compassion Cultivation Training, and they were looking for facilitators. So I was in the very first cohort to go through a year-long training at Stanford to learn how to teach compassion. And so Compassionate became a nonprofit organization, and we lead compassion trainings for people of all walks of life around the globe. And now I've been doing that for, 13 years, which is hard to believe.
That is incredible. It is really such a powerful story. Not only how you transformed your life, but how you've helped to transform others and what you are learning and sharing. Mark, I'm going to guess you've got a question in here. So I've got some, but let's get you in the party, Mark.
I've got so many questions.
Yeah. Lay it on me.
I'm going to start with this, though. As you've worked with compassion over that long period of time, what have been some insights that you've gained that maybe were a little surprising to you?
Some things that surprised me the most was how much I continue to learn about compassion as I'm working with different groups. So you think coming in like, well, I didn't think this, but one might think, well, I'm the expert, so I know all this and I'm just teaching. But every single group that I would work with, I would gain more of an understanding of common humanity, which is like, wow, we are so much alike. And I did work at the women's jail here in San Diego and at the maximum security prison. And I learned so much more from those groups than I imagine they learned from me. Just under this true understanding that, yes, we are alike in so many ways. And same with leaders at Google. I might think, gosh, I have nothing in common with someone like that. And then realize during trainings, like, oh gosh, I have a lot in common with big tech leaders. And so every single group that I work with has taught me that piece of common humanity so much more. And then what has dawned on me over the years was this missing piece of self-compassion. I don't know if you want me to dive into that already, or if you want me to pause on self-compassion. Maybe Amy, if you want to talk about how that's important to, how you found that to be so important.
Yeah. So this is about you. This is your platform. So you took us exactly where I was going to take us next. So perfect. Talk about the self-compassion, because it is so important, but we want to hear you.
Okay. Well, I love to hear your thoughts too, but self-compassion, as we learn, when you learn about compassion, you realize compassion is a response to suffering. Okay. And if I'm not handling my own suffering and taking care of myself, I can't show up in the way that I want to show up to respond to the suffering of others. So self-compassion is a huge component of compassion. And over the years, I've taught a lot of self-compassion. In fact, that's almost the most popular workshop that people ask for, because I think it's so needed in our society, and people suffer from burnout in workplaces. And when I teach self-compassion, I point out the three main pillars of self-compassion. That this is defined by Kristen Neff, who's the main researcher of self-compassion out at the University of Texas at Austin. And she defines those pillars as mindfulness of your own suffering, common humanity, which is recognizing I'm not alone in my suffering. And then the third piece is self-kindness. So learning how to talk to myself the way I speak to people I care about. Well, what I found that was missing is that another important component, I argue, another important component of self-compassion is community. And you may say, well, that's not self. And I disagree. I think we are social animals that need each other. And a part of my self-compassion practice is reaching out to my friends and neighbors and my loved ones and making sure that I have community and I have someone that I can lean on when I need support. So I heard someone on a podcast, and I don't remember the podcast or who was actually talking, so I wish I could refer you to where it was, but someone was talking about self-compassion and said, I'm tired of people telling people to put their oxygen mask on before putting others' oxygen masks on, when what we should be saying is make sure you have a community that can help you put your mask on. So that then you can help others. Instead of putting it's all on me to take care of myself so that I can take care of others, it needs to be that I have people around me who can help me take care of me so that I can help others. And that statement really stood out to me. And so I've been incorporating that piece into my work a lot more and making sure people are spending time nurturing their relationships. And we're in the middle of a loneliness epidemic in our society right now. And we need each other. And the way that we live right now, many of us working from home, we have these phones that divide us and keep us looking at screens instead of at each other. So we really need to be intentional about nurturing our relationships.
Yeah. I love that.
Thank you.
That is fantastic. And I love that idea of let's build a community where we're all worried about getting the oxygen mask, where we have enough oxygen.
Yes.
Enough of the compassion oxygen in our communities. I would love, Sara, to hear an example or two as you go into organizations and you talk to them about compassion and self-compassion and compassion for others. What are some examples of how that has changed organizations, or how has it changed interactions with people within organizations?
Yeah, I have had the opportunity to work very closely with a community college district here in San Diego. And what's been really neat is to see how even workshops that I've led for leaders and for faculty and staff, they're bringing these components of the workshop into their offices and into their classrooms as well. So again, a lot of it is self-compassion related, but learning how to take care of themselves and set boundaries so that they can show up for their colleagues and for their students in a better way. They're looking at infusing compassion into their strategic planning for the next school year. So really looking at what does a system of compassion look like so that we are centering compassion at our organization. That's kind of the main goal for me, is to help organizations do that. But you hear these one-off stories where people realize, gosh, as a leader, I now know how to interact with my teammates in a better way because I'm prioritizing compassion and I'm seeing them as human beings, not just, components of a team that aren't humans, right? Especially, again, if you're working remotely and you see people on screens or you're typing with them all the time, you may forget their humanity and maybe not give them the benefit of the doubt, or maybe not interact with them in the most skillful way. So,
And you talked on so many things that are so critical. The connection, right? The connection I'm hearing is so key there. Um, when you talk about the systems of compassion, right? I'm curious. I have your book, A Case for Compassion, and you're talking about the systems in there. And I was really blown away how you broke that down. I mean, you really got laser focused in how broken our systems are here. And I'm wondering, can you just give one example? There's a lot that you give in that book, but is there one example to illustrate to our listeners about how our systems are broken, and even take it to the point of, because I think sometimes people feel powerless when they think about a system, but what can they do, right? Is there anything that they can do? So could you talk about that for a bit, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And it's tough because these systems are huge. And in the book, I look at these big systems like education, healthcare, corrections, law enforcement, and the workplace. Those are the five that I focus on. And I gave specific examples of here are places where they're using compassion, and we can try to be a little bit more like that. And so one example that I like to think about is the correction system in Norway, where the goal of corrections there is to create good neighbors. Can you imagine if that's what our jails and prisons and correctional institutions, if that was the goal, we're trying to create good neighbors? I've been in those institutions, and it seems like it could not be further from that. The way that we're treating people inhumanely, and not feeding them well, not giving them a good place to sleep, and I mean, it's it's unbelievable, frankly. Um, and I just something like that, where in Norway they live in cabins, and they have kitchens. They live in cabins with other people, and they share kitchens with actual knives that they can use for cutting. And I'm sure if there might be some violent folks that they need to protect themselves and others from, but they really do trust people um, to be humans and to learn how to work together and live together so that they can come back into society and have it be a seamless transition. And we just do such a terrible job of that here in the United States, of really rehabilitating people and helping them and recognizing this. This is a quote that comes from Nonviolent Communication. The author of that is Marshall Rosenberg, and it's something to the effect of all unskilled behavior comes from an unmet need. So whether it's like road rage or the worst act you can possibly think of, there's an unmet need there, and recognize that there's a human behind that. And how can that person be supported now? So that need can be met. In my interactions, especially at Donovan Prison, I realized, gosh, if I had the same upbringing as you and the same life, whether it's being in the system or what have you from a young age, I would be here too. If that had happened to me, I would be here too. And so I just think we're lacking compassion in all of those systems, but especially in corrections. We just label people as a criminal and place them in a box and hide them away. And it's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for digging into that. Mark, I can see you have a question.
Yeah, just following up on that, because one of the other systems that you mentioned kind of in passing, and I'd love you to go a little deeper on it, is education. What are some of the system problems with our education system that is moving us away from instead of toward compassion?
Well, I think for one is we don't allow enough space for self-compassion or compassion by the educators. So our educators are overworked, and they have these standards that they have to meet, tests that they have to teach to. And depending on the school, maybe kids are supposed to behave a certain way, and so they have to be strict. And they aren't offered opportunities to treat each student as a human. And again, like teaching to the test is not very compassionate. I do understand we need to hold our teachers to certain standards, but it just seems like an impossible ask. And the example, another example that I wrote about in the book was creating spaces for students to be able to go decompress. So there was a high school where there's a mindful moment room where if you're starting to feel charged and you might act out as a student, you're taught that, oh gosh, you learn my body feels this way. I think I need to go take a beat and go sit in this room and maybe color or just sit silently or listen to music, go be in this room so that I can calm my nervous system down. So giving students the skills and opportunities to work with their nervous systems and learn what do they need so that they don't act out in the classroom. And we don't take time to teach skills like emotional intelligence, compassion, self-compassion. There's a little bit more these days, and I'm encouraged to see some cool projects going on around it. But imagine if we really cared about, like, we care about you as a child. That is our goal. If you are acting up, we aren't punishing you. We're saying what's going on, what happened, what's making you act this way, right? And having curiosity and compassion instead of any kind of punitive actions.
Yeah. Part of the reason I asked that was it goes back to that Wayne Dyer quote that really got you onto this journey. If compassion is the most important topic we can teach, or the most important skill we can teach to our children, we need to be teaching it to them in schools too.
Absolutely.
It needs to be part of their overall broader education. So I love that thought.
And to think about, this is maybe taking this off the rails a little bit, but in our society, we care more about how much money are you making? Yeah. What job are you going to get? Right? That's what we're showing to our kids. You need to get out in the world and you're going to be successful if you make a lot of money and you have a great job and you can be completely independent. Whereas, you know what? We're humans who should be taking care of each other. And our goals should be, how do we take care of each other? How do we take care of our planet? That's what we should be teaching kids too. Of course, we need to teach them other skills that they should learn. But how are those skills how do you have positive relationships? What's it take to be in a good friendship and a good partnership? Like these skills that you really do need in life to have a happy life, not a quote unquote successful life.
And I'm just going to cue our listeners that Amy and I are going to talk about this more in our follow-up episode.
Yeah, there's so much.
Because I've got so much I want to say on that very topic. The only thing I'll say here, and then I know, Amy, you had something you wanted to get to, is it's funny that we put that as an either or. You can either go out and make money and be successful, or you can be a compassionate person. And I really believe that's a false dichotomy.
Agreed.
If we are a good person, if we treat people well, you are likely to actually get better business results on the other side of that.
Yeah.
And I think setting up that as two opposite ends of a spectrum is just the wrong perspective that we give to kids as they grow into adulthood and move into the work world.
I couldn't agree more. Totally. Yep.
Yeah, and that's actually a great segue for where I wanted to go. And one of the reasons why Mark and I started this podcast is because we really wanted to bring listeners on that can help dispel the myth of compassion is soft. Compassion is foo-foo. It's really, can you talk about that? Can you really talk about, I don't need to prompt you more. Can you talk about how compassion is not soft, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, I talk about this a lot because compassion, if you think about it, compassionate people stand up for those who need support and for those who maybe can't help themselves. That takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage. One of my favorite teachers, Roshi Joan Halifax, talks about the posture of compassion is a strong back and a soft front.
Mm.
So we're very grounded and strong with compassion, with an open heart. And I think that's a really important visual and something that, like, even in my body, when I do that, I'm like, yeah, this is compassion. Compassion does not make you a doormat. Compassion says, no, I'm not going to let you treat me that way. I'm not going to let you treat others that way. That takes a lot of courage to, and Brene Brown's work, she talks about the most compassionate people that she's come across in her research, what they all had in common, where they had the firmest boundaries. That takes courage and strength to set a boundary and say, I need this for me. So I can't do that because I need this in order to be my best self so that I can show up for others. So there are so many ways. And I know it really is frustrating that people think compassion is this soft skill. And it takes strength. I mean, we're born with it, but it kind of gets beaten out of us as we go through life, unfortunately, in our society, where it's not really nurtured in our society. So it's a muscle that we can strengthen and we can practice, but it is a muscle, and we do have to practice it in order to be able to stand up with compassion when it's needed.
That's right.
Sorry, real quick. Think about how compassion is a response to suffering. How many times are they in the midst of suffering and they want to run away from it, or they're going to pretend they don't see it, or they get overwhelmed? I mean, suffering is a hard thing to be around, but with compassion, I have the courage and I'm able to be present with that suffering. And so there's nothing weak about that.
And that is, when I first started the training, the Cultivating Compassion training at UCSD that you helped build, I remember when I heard that, I thought, I'm not suffering. I was in denial. I didn't know how much pain, even though I'd been talking about compassion for so long, I was ignoring some deep-seated pain that I was like, oh, you know what? Yes, there is some work I need to do here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a powerful moment for me, really.
Well, and you bring up a good point, because I'm saying the word suffering a lot and people maybe don't even know what that means. In our society, we think suffering means something terrible, right? Something obvious. And so people say, yeah, I'm not suffering. But when we talk about suffering in the compassion world, we're saying whenever there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. So if you want something you can't get, or you get something you don't want, you're suffering.
Yeah.
Well, how many of us are wishing we had that thing, or wishing we didn't have that thing? Most of us, like most of the time.
Yeah.
So there is suffering everywhere, and everybody is a candidate for your compassion because of that. You can just realize you're a human being, Mark. I know you're suffering. I don't have to know what it is to show up with compassion, or show up with compassion for you.
That's so beautiful. Listen, we could talk to you all day.
Oh, and I love talking about compassion. I could talk all day about it.
We could talk to you all day. So tell us, where can people find you? Where can they get these awesome compassionate bracelets, self-compassionate and compassionate bracelets, right? Where can they get these? Where can they find you? Tell us. We'll put them in the notes too.
It is at compassionit.com. So you can find the book, the wristbands. You can join our advocate program, which is just a monthly donation. And each month I send out a video lesson and some other resources to help you strengthen your compassion. What else is there? We have a free 30-day challenge on the website. I'm also a leadership coach. So if there are any leaders out there who would like to nurture their compassion and self-compassion, I can support that. And I guess that's it. Compassionate.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Mark, you want to ask our question?
Oh, sure. And I just also mentioned that we'll put all the links to that into the show notes so that people can find you easily with this episode and the following one. Sara, we always like to end with this final question. What is one tip that you can give to our compassionators, our listeners, that'll help them to infuse compassion into their lives in this coming week?
I'm going to focus this on self-compassion and challenge everyone to notice their inner voice. And if it's an inner critic that they're hearing, change that to an inner coach, a voice of support, encouragement, kindness, instead of that critic that's always pointing out what's wrong and calling you an idiot. So notice that voice, turn it to a coach, and see what happens this week when you do that.
I love that tip. I think mostly because I'm going to need that one. So I'm going to take that to heart and do that and challenge the rest of our listeners to join us in that.
Awesome.
In that tip from Sara and that challenge. Sara, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Really.
This has been such a wonderful time. And like Amy and you both said, we could go on for a long time.
We could.
Fascinators for listening, for being with us. I hope that you'll follow through and look up Sara more. I'd love to see more of those compassionate bracelets out there in the world. And have a great week of infusing compassion into your lives, the lives of your community, and all of those around you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Infuse Compassion podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, please share a review and like the podcast so other compassionators can join us. Until next time, let's all do something each day to infuse compassion into the world. For more information on our guests, see the show notes. For more information on Mark and Amy, go to infusecompassion.com.